My name's DakotaJKeeler, and welcome back to the fourth part of our Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised 12th edition. Today we're going to be talking about the Deliberative Assembly. First, we need to establish what is the Deliberative Assembly. Well, it applies to parliamentary law, or rather, parliamentary law is generally understood to apply to it, and it composes out of 7 elements. 1. A group of people in free and full discussion that can make decisions in the name of the group. 2. The group meets in an area with equivalent conditions for simultaneous communication. That is, we can all come together, someone can make a motion, can be recognized. You don't really get this with Zoom. It's hard to get acknowledged, it's hard to know who's actually there for quorum purposes. Third, people are free to act according to their own judgment, so whether to pay attention or not, whether to get up and leave, to vote or abstain. 4, in each decision made, each member has a vote, and it's equal weight expressed by vote. And then the voting member assumes direct responsibility for the decision should his or her vote prevail. So if we're a snowmobile club and the vote is whether to have or to adopt new trails, and I vote in favor and the vote passes, then I have to assume direct responsibility for implementing the trail program, for the consequences of it, whether that means more time out there maintaining it, having to raise dues or whatever to cover the cost of it. I'm responsible for that. On the other hand, failure to concur in a body doesn't constitute withdrawal, meaning if you vote against it because you think it's too costly, you think we haven't thought it through well enough, or whatever, just because you say no or vote against it doesn't mean you're no longer part of our club or our body. And then 7, if members are absent, the present members can act so long as they have a quorum, which a quorum is like the minimum amount of number members needed for a whole body. Then we move on to section 1.2. Robert's Rules is designed for group meetings that meet these conditions. Though some of the general principles can be applied to assemblies that don't quite meet these requirements, their application can vary and their usefulness can vary. In 1.3, we get the difference between an assembly and a meeting. An assembly is just when the people who make up the body are assembled. They could be talking about the weather, drinking coffee, talking about their sled event. But the meeting is when we're assembled to transact business. So to vote in whether to have a trail or not, to pass a budget or not. That would be a meeting. In 1.4, we define what Robert's Rules means by a member. And so when they use the term member, they mean you have the right to attend a meeting, the right to make a motion, the right to speak in a debate, and the right to vote. No member may be denied any of these basic rights except through disciplinary procedures. And we'll learn more about those in sections 61 to 63. And then an organization can have different classes of membership that are entitled to all the rights above. So maybe our snowmobile club has a junior membership that allows, let's say, high schoolers to participate, but that doesn't necessarily give them a voting right. And so different ways you can manipulate that to different ends. 1.5, if a body doesn't adopt a parliamentary manual to follow, it's understood to be bound by the common parliamentary law, insofar as its members can agree to what that is. And then an organization or society, it fundamentally reserves the right to alter or supplement that general parliamentary law, though it seems best for a society to just adopt a rule set, whether it's Robert's Rules or Crushing's Manual or Jefferson's, just to have something you can reference back to and be like, okay guys, these are the rules. And then an organization is subject to all laws, national, state, and local. So if there's a federal act passed, or a state act, or a local village ordinance, if it affects your body, it takes precedent over Robert's rules. So for example, Robert's rules allows for a body to make its meetings secret, but a village would have a hard time with that in many states under the Sunshine Laws, which says that their meetings must be open to the public, and things like that. The fundamental principle of a deliberative assembly is for the action to constitute the will of the body, it has to be done by a majority vote, which is one more than 50%. So if you have 100 people, it's 51 members of the body. And this principle can be modified in 3 ways: as required by law, as provided by a special rule of the society, or required by the general parliamentary law. If a higher vote count is required, it's usually a 2/3 vote, like to suspend a member or to change something previously adopted. And then some motions require previous notice. So this is notice that's either given at the last meeting, like, hey, next meeting I plan to do this, or it's included in the call of a meeting, usually written. It could be email as well if your bylaws allow for it, saying, hey, at this place and this time we're calling a meeting and I plan to do X. And then we have an idea of the majority of the entire membership, and that will be discussed more in section 44. Whenever the rules require a vote, it is only binding so long as a quorum is present, that is your minimum amount of members. So if your bylaws don't adopt a requirement for quorum, it's 50% of the membership, or a majority. But there are a few things that they can actually do without a quorum. That's to fix the time to which to adjourn. So they could say, okay, we're going to have another meeting tomorrow and adjourn at 7. They could just adjourn right now. They could recess. Or they could use any other measures to obtain a quorum. So a motion to make a couple phone calls would be acceptable even though they don't have a quorum. And subsidiary and incidental motions, if related to the above, like rising to a question of privilege, call for the orders of the day, etc. And then we get to the types of deliberative assemblies. There's 5 principal types of deliberative assemblies. You have 1, the mass meeting, 2, the assembly of the organized society, 3, the convention, 4, the legislative body, and 5, the board. So the mass meeting is the simplest form of an assembly, and a mass meeting is where you have an unorganized body, where someone puts out a call to convention or a mass meeting, and people show up around that issue. Its membership and participation can be limited to a particular topic. So let's say I want to build a new park in Lake Odessa. I might put out a call to meeting for those who live in the village on the issue of the park. So if you live like over in Clarksville, you would not be welcome to the meeting, but anyone within inside Lake Odessa who has a say or an interest in the park, either for or against, would be welcome at it. And in fact, a lot of organized societies, when they first organize, it usually starts in the format of a mass meeting. And you can learn more about those in section 53. Next area is your local assembly of an organized society. That's the most common type of body you're going to come into contact with. It's usually the highest authority of that society or branch, only subject to the Constitution. So like, my dad runs a snowmobile club called Backwoods Snowmobile. Its organized assembly, which meets quarterly without a special called-in meeting, is the highest authority for that club. Whereas you might have like the National Association of Parliamentarians, where you have a national body and then it's broken up into local affiliates. So the assembly of those affiliates is the highest authority for that affiliate, but the national convention is the highest authority for that whole body. And then normally a society's constitution or bylaws dictates when a society holds its regular meetings, which could be weekly, monthly, quarterly, or rarely annually, and they provide for the rules for calling a special meeting. And normally each meeting is its own session, meaning rules that require that some motions can't be brought up more in one session. The general rule is a new meeting is a new session, and so we can bring up a new topic. And then a convention is an assembly of delegates. It doesn't include permanently established lawmaking bodies. The delegates are chosen for one session, and they represent constituent units of subdivisions of larger bodies. So organized state and national societies makes the most use of conventions, either annually or biannually, and they can also be called for forming an association or federation of interested parties. And in this manner, they act similar to your mass meetings. So we might have a couple different already established societies, and we might issue or call to issue a convention between them to form a federation, kind of like a one government board over them. Or we might say we call a convention between these different bodies to say we have this common issue, like the snow isn't being plowed, it affects all of us, so why don't we call a meeting or a convention to say, well, how do we solve this? And they usually don't last for more than a week. However, constitutional conventions could last for months. The total number of persons entitled to vote must be certified by the convention's credentials committee, and this is where you get the term the majority of the entire membership in a convention of delegates is the total number of members entitled to vote. So let's say you have 100 registered delegates, so a total of the entire membership would be, majority of that would be 51, whereas you might only have 70 current delegates. You would still need 51 members. The conclusion of a convention normally dissolves the assembly. When a state or national body convenes a new convention, it is a new session. And then you can learn more about that in section 58, 59, and 60. Legislative bodies refer to constitutionally established lawmaking bodies chosen by representatives of the electors. This would include Congress and your state legislature. In it, sessions can last months. Your members are paid. They usually have a duty to devote their daily attention to it, and their attendance can be compelled by law. Most legislatures have specially adopted rules of procedures. Most of them use Mason's Rules of Legislative Procedure. And it's kind of like Robert's Rules, but the advantage is that it quotes right to their state constitution, to their case laws, and to their statutes. This means that I, as a legislator, can know whether I'm following the law or not. But for most organized society, you don't need that level of detail. And for most organized societies, you might pass a resolution to do something private in your society, but you don't really encounter bills or acts all that much. But Mason's rules teach you how to lay out such documents, even though they're not normal for a private association or things like that to do. And then you can learn more at the provided link. Smaller public bodies, while they may take on a lawmaking function, they don't have the full character of such. And normally they represent a board, more likely. And a lot of them use Robert's Rules, whereas Mason's Rules is just too technical for them. Then in section 122, we talk about the last and final type of our principle, deliberative assemblies, which is the board, which is an administrative, managerial, or quasi-judicial body of elected or appointed persons. They're usually smaller than most bodies, and the board doesn't function autonomously. Its powers and responsibilities is delegated onto it from an authority outside itself. There's a couple ways boards can come into existence. They can be assigned a particular function on behalf of a national, state, or local government, i.e. a village board, a city council, a board of education. These are boards that a higher body has established and given to it a particular task. And then in non-stock corporations, a body that doesn't have an assembly or a body of persons that constitute a general voting membership, so like a university or foundation, the board of directors, managers, trustees, or governors is the supreme governing body of that institution. So in Michigan, we have 3 universities whose board of trustees are elected on the general ballot, and those boards are the supreme governing body of that institution, subject only to state law. Similar in a stock corporation, although the board of directors is elected by the shareholder at an annual meeting, a board of an organized society is the instrument of that body, and it is therefore subordinate to it. And you can learn more in section 49. And then small boards and committees are allowed far more flexibility and informality in applying Robert's rules, and more can be found in 49.21 and 50.25 through 26. Because that's one of the things I want to stress. You can be too formal when applying Robert's rules, especially in your smaller settings. And Robert's rules accounts for that. Thank you for watching. I hope you found part 4 on deliberative assemblies educational and entertainful. In the next section, we'll be talking about the rules that govern deliberative assemblies and societies. Thank you so much for watching, and have a blessed day.